Good evening and welcome to another episode of Pegasys Presents. I'm Lauren Stefanelli, Access Coordinator here at Pegasys. And today we're going to be talking about a new exhibit that's just opened at the History Center of Tompkins County. So with me to talk about that are two experts on this subject, Executive Director of the History Center, Howe, and the archivist and acting curator of the exhibit, Donna Eschenbrenner. Welcome to both of you guys.
Thank you.
And the name of the exhibit is In Memoriam, Cemeteries of Tompkins County, which I guess maybe this is kind of an overlooked subject when you think about the kind of art and interest and architecture there is in cemeteries, and you guys are exploring it and sharing it with us. So Rod, maybe you could tell us how you came up with the idea for this exhibit.
Sure. I think this is actually the first exhibit that I had a chance to put some input in since I started. I think cemeteries play a very important role in our community, in our landscapes. So it was a chance for us to sit back and think about the role and our relationships to cemeteries. We've got some questions that we want individuals and families to consider as they not only come into the exhibit, but we have plenty of opportunities for people to go out to the cemeteries as well, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So it seemed, I grew up here, so I have a lot of relatives buried in the cemeteries throughout the county. So it seemed like kind of a natural thing to want to do, and Donna will certainly give more of an overview of the themes that we want to cover in this exhibit. The exhibit is sponsored, by the way, by the Tompkins Trust Company, so we thank them very much for their support of this exhibit. But Donna, would you like to talk about the themes that we're highlighting?
Sure. So we decided to focus on three overarching themes. The art and architecture of these beautiful places in the county. We decided to look at the history and genealogy that's present in cemeteries. And then we also looked at what we're calling practical matters, the business of cemeteries. It's property, and we had to look at the different aspects of business relationships that people develop with cemetery associations, for example.
Well, so if people go into this History Center, what are they going to see in this exhibit?
They're going to see dozens and dozens of photographs highlighting different cemeteries from around the county. We picked one cemetery from each town and the city cemetery from the city of Ithaca to plug into these particular themes, and we took historic images from our collections and we enlisted the help of several volunteers to go out to the cemeteries themselves with cameras, and we took modern photographs as well. So we have the juxtaposition of the old and the new. We have a couple of headstones that we're highlighting, one from our own collection, one that's on loan from a local historian. We have mourning clothes. The textiles we thought would be an interesting accompaniment to remind people that this isn't just about place, but it's also about the people within the place. Mm-hmm. And we have some artifacts from a sister institution out in Dryden highlighting a local cemetery out there.
Okay, so it's not about, say, methods of burial at certain time past. It's about the place, the park-like grounds, and the type of headstones, and the connection to different families in the community over time. Are there certain really prominent families that keep coming up over and over again that have especially beautiful burial places that people would want to look for?
There are, and we've tried to highlight a couple of them. One, the name Treeman, I'm sure sounds familiar to all of your viewers. In Grove Cemetery, Abner Treeman is buried there. We picked the Danby Rural Cemetery because the Beers family is buried there. That started out actually as a Beers family burial ground. And then later became a municipal cemetery. So yes, those families, there are several recurring names that people will recognize.
And one thing that I think about when I think about old-style cemeteries that have beautiful carvings in them is I think about some people like to go to cemeteries to do rubbings. You know, that seemed, or at least it was, a popular hobby, I guess, at a certain time in going to cemeteries. Do you have any interest in that in this exhibit?
Well, actually, we don't, because we found out it's bad for the stones.
Oh, so you don't want to encourage people to go do that?
Right. Right, because some of the artwork on these grave markers some of it's exquisite, and every time it's rubbed, it's diminished somewhat. So we don't talk about it at all. We're hoping not to encourage people to do it.
But we are encouraging people to look at the images that can be found on gravestones. As you can imagine, we have several programs that will be happening related to this exhibit. And one is, we're calling it the Coffin Man. And he has a very unique style of what he engraved on the headstones. So you can, once you know about his style, you can start to pick out, oh, that was probably done by him. So we're encouraging people to come.
You just named him that yourselves.
I think it's Mary Dexter is the woman who's doing the presentation. Before she found out his name, she had to do pretty deep research to find out who he was. I think she had just come up with the name, the Coffin Man, so we kept that name. But we certainly encourage people to look at the variety of gravestones, the epitaphs, what they're made of, and some beautiful images on some of the gravestones. I think Donna actually has...
yeah, you have some of the images with you, some of the things that we'll see. Do you want to show us some of what you brought here?
Sure. One of the things that I tried to highlight is the difference in the symbolism that's used. This first one is very old. It's from the early... It
looks like a willow tree.
That's exactly what it is. It's a weeping willow. And weeping willows were very common in early and mid-19th century headstones because they symbolized grief, mourning.
Oh, weeping willow.
Weeping willow,
there you
exactly,
go.
exactly. But this was a convention that I think died out, and then in later years you saw more stylized things, you saw religious things, you saw two hands pointing towards heaven, you saw the cross for Christians, you saw
angel wings.
Angel wings, or angels even, the Star of David for Jews. And one of the things that we tried to highlight is that change in style over time. So one of the cemetery headstones that we highlight is one from the latter part, actually the early part of the 21st century. This particular one that I'm showing here is from 2011. We highlight the beauty of this stone, but we also highlight the history of the gentleman who's buried there. This particular one we found very interesting. We've gone from weeping willows to tractors. This was a man who was...
That's right, there's a tractor right on the...
There's a tractor actually engraved on the stone and placed on the foundation stone by his loving family. He was a car salesman, but this gentleman also loved his small farm. And his family remembered that when the man died, and they memorialized it with the stone. So they engraved the tractor on the stone, and then someone lovingly placed 3 small model tractors on the foundation stone there. And we thought that was particularly poignant and particularly moving. So we highlighted that one as well.
Wow, that's really interesting, quite unusual. And there's a dog back there. Is there on your next one, isn't it? I'm looking behind.
There is, and that one's, again, poignant is the word that I would use.
Oh my goodness, it's a dog and a little child.
Right, and one of the things that we found when we did a research on the history that we found in cemeteries was not just family history, but the history of the community itself. And in our cemeteries in Tompkins County, many of which are very old, we found quite a number of children's burials. And children's burial sites are so much more common in the 19th century than they are now, obviously. So we did research on child and infant mortality rates, and they were appalling in the mid-19th century and the late 19th century. And it wasn't until the middle part of the 20th century that the rates started going down. This particular stone, we couldn't make out the name of the family, but it's especially sad because it's not our child, but it's our children that's engraved on the front of the stone. And very often when we looked at children's headstones, we found a figure of a lamb, and that symbolized innocence and charm. And this particular one was unique. It was a dog. So we theorized that this particular family had a dog that I think the grieving parents might have wanted to be looking over their lost children after they died. So I think the parents chose that, possibly for some very personal and poignant reasons.
Mm-hmm. Certainly it's not a cookie cutter or headstone. It's not something that I've ever seen anywhere else. So maybe it's original and even unique.
Right.
And that's partly what we're trying to do here is it's an invitation. It's an invitation to explore the cemeteries in Tompkins County. Again, not just by coming into our exhibit space. I think people will be surprised at how many cemeteries there are in the county. That we give a website that lists 200 cemeteries, but we know that there's more cemeteries than that have been forgotten, that are very, very small family plots. And we talk about how who managed and cared for cemeteries has changed over time. If I might just mention a couple of the programs. Again, we have a number of programs that will go through into 2016. The exhibit will stay up through mid-February of 2016. We still have to put together some of the programming for after the first of the year, but one of them we're anticipating is preservation and maintenance issues. There are still very active cemetery associations, but sometimes those associations have gone out of business for a variety of ways, and it might be that a municipality now is having to take charge of a cemetery. That's very different. Typically, a municipality is not prepared to do that. It might be that some are still being cared by family members, so they have to think about these maintenance and preservation issues. We have a session coming up on the archaeology of cemeteries. We thought it was important to, one of the cemeteries that's in our national psyche is the Arlington National Cemetery. So we have someone coming up to talk about preservation issues on October 17th on the Arlington National Cemetery. We have a presentation on Green Springs. That's the natural cemetery that's in Newfield. So we're trying to cover cemeteries from different perspectives. And for fun, we've got a scavenger hunt where we have clues from 8 different cemeteries that you have to go out and find and bring back to us.
Well,
so it's really encouraging.
What is the scavenger hunt?
Well, I'll give one small example.
Exactly? We're not digging up anybody's graves here, are we?
No, of course not. But an example is Lakeview Cemetery is one of those listed in the scavenger hunt. And you have to find Carl Sagan's grave and tell us something specific about that grave. I won't say more, but we give clues.
So you have to find a certain grave marker and then report something specific, unusual, and unique that's on that marker to fill in one of the elements of the scavenger hunt.
And then there's also tours. I think there's 5 or 6 tours. Some of them are being offered by Historic Ithaca, specific to the Ithaca City Cemetery, and then some we've worked with municipal historians to offer on Pleasant Grove, Newfield, Trumansburg. So we're encouraging people to get out and explore as well as part of this process.
And if they were to go on a tour, will they hear some personal anecdotes about some of the people that are buried there? What will they learn on the tour?
I think that each one will be different. Many of them are being led by our municipal historians. So they will each have their own unique feel to it based on that historian's approach to it. I know that when there's one on Pleasant Grove, and we're excited because we use Carrie Manning's diary with our 8 Square Schoolhouse, and Carrie Manning happens to be buried at Pleasant Grove Cemetery. And we recently just found her grave. It was actually by a couple of youth who came to our summer camp and were determined to go out and find her grave. So we have fun stories like that happening.
Isn't that funny? Every time you come here, you tell me something like this, where something that proves that history isn't all done and finished. We don't know everything about everything, which is why everything's constantly being revised, because we're always finding out new pieces of the puzzle of the past.
We also have scavenger hunts for just in our own exhibit, too, to encourage people to really take a look at what we've put up on the walls.
Are these scavenger hunts for adults, for kids?
Both. So we have a version for children and a version for adults. We're really hoping that a lot of high school students and college students might be interested in the scavenger hunt that will take you out to different parts of the county. We look forward to hearing feedback on those.
So on the tours, do people meet out at the specific cemetery?
Yes, for the tours, and all the dates will be on a slide later on with a specific time. The scavenger hunt you can go and do on your own. So it's just go find the clue, write down the clue.
And if they go on the scavenger hunt and they get all the clues, do they win something?
We will encourage them to bring them to us, we'll collect them, and yes, we will have a drawing. We haven't decided what the prize will be yet, but we do want people to give us their completed scratch sheets here with the information on it.
Well, I do believe a prize is in order.
I agree, I agree.
Okay. So there was one other picture, Donna, that you had here that we have on the easel that you didn't show, and maybe you could tell us what that is.
Sure. That is, I would say, probably the high point of the exhibit, Lauren. This is a picture of the Ithaca Firemen's Monument at the Ithaca City Cemetery, and it's probably one of the most beautiful monuments in all of the county. It's 20 feet of marble honoring the firefighters who served the city of Ithaca, and this particular one was dedicated in 1861. Behind it, you can see a monument that was dedicated in 2006, honoring the firefighters who actually died in the line of duty. These are particularly beautiful and significant monuments honoring people who serve the community. In fact, it represents the best of a section of the exhibit that we refer to as memorials. Firefighters, soldiers, police, veterans, people who have served, and the different monuments that honor their work.
And in fact, one of the programs is going to focus on honoring our veterans and the memorials in our cemeteries that honor veterans.
So this is going to be the talk on Saturday, November 2nd at 2 o'clock on War Veterans Memorials?
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct. I think it's November 7th.
Oh, November 7th, sorry. Yes, you're right. And the one on Thursday, December 10th on Green Springs Natural Cemetery. You know, I've kind of come across articles about that and what that is, but I don't think everybody really knows what a natural cemetery is. Could you explain that, Donna?
Sure. It's unique. There are only maybe a dozen of them in all of the United States. The idea behind natural burial is that the body is given back to the earth. Embalming fluid is not used for the deceased. People are buried in biodegradable pine boxes or very simple wooden boxes, and traditional gravestones are not used. Small headstones, simple stones or trees or other plantings are used. For example, if you look at a picture of Green Springs Cemetery, all you see are beautiful open fields. You can't see any stones at all. They don't allow it. So it's the whole...
So there's no marker as to where anyone's located?
No. Sometimes a simple flat stone in the ground, but by and large, not even that. Usually it's just plantings, shrubs or trees families are allowed to put in.
And I think this points to, we do think that there's a change in our relationship to cemeteries, and perhaps how we think about death. So, you know, we want people to talk within their families and with friends. We think there's something there that needs to be discussed more fully.
Well, it's interesting that the topic even comes up because over the weekend I watched this movie, which is an older movie. It's called The Fountain, with Rachel Weisz in it as a woman who is terminally ill and she's going to die, and she's writing this thesis for her doctorate about the fountain of youth and the conquistadors that were trying to find it. And she, as part of it, there's a poem that someone writes about how when he dies, there's going to be a tree planted over him, and he's going to become a part of that tree, and he's going to be able to see the world and enjoy the world through the natural tree that grows. And the end of the movie, you know, she passes away, and he takes a sycamore seed that she had held and showed him, and he puts it over where she's buried, and that's how the movie ends. And you, of course, think about that poem when she does that, and think about how connected everything is, and that's, yeah, I guess that's kind of the idea with Green Springs.
Exactly.
Huh?
Exactly. One other thing I didn't mention, that we're trying to give people multiple avenues to think about this. So Tompkins County Public Library put together a series of books related to cemeteries, to death. So one for kids, there's a list for kids, and there's one for adults. So you can find that on our website, but we also have printout lists. So if you're a literary person and you're looking to dig into cemeteries, either from a fiction or nonfiction standpoint, we've got some resources there as well.
Right before the show, Donna, you were telling me that also in cemeteries, sometimes you can find some kind of a structure that's made to keep bodies over the winter until they can be planted in the spring. And could you explain what you were explaining to me?
Sure. We have pictures in the exhibit of what we call receiving vaults. These are actually stone buildings. They're usually in this hilly area. They're built into a hillside with a beautiful stone front. They are actually storage vaults in this very cold climate. In the wintertime, people cannot be buried. You can't break ground. It's too hard, it's too frozen. So cemeteries offered a service for many years, allowing families to store their dead in their caskets in these receiving vaults. They're large underground rooms with these imposing doors. And very often what would happen is during the coldest months, the dead would be stored there, and then in the spring, when the ground was soft enough to be dug, there would be a flurry of funerals because people could all be buried then.
Wow. It's funny how different cultures deal with burial and cemeteries and visiting the dead and honoring the dead so very differently. And I think that we kind of, I mean, we have traditions too. Maybe it's not Day of the Dead, and maybe it's not the same as, say, Louisiana, where you get a certain amount of time, and then boom, you're out of the box, and somebody else comes in. And I mean, it's just everywhere you go, the tradition is different. But we have traditions too. There is a cemetery that's from the 1800s that I can walk to from my house out in Enfield, and it's in the middle of farm fields, and there's just like nothing there but this place where this 1800s cemetery is, with a bunch of rickety old stones that are falling apart and stuff, and there's not more than, I don't know, there's not more than 20 of them there, and so many of them are children. It's just shocking how many of them are really, really young. So what they did was they just let the trees grow up around this one little place, and everything's being farmed around it, but in this one little place at the top of a hill, that's clearly a family plot that's kept, and I'm sure there's just many of them all over the place that are sort of private places that a family kept to honor the people that first settled here, and they never made it to the level of being a cemetery for a whole community. But they're still dotting the landscape, and they're still very poignant, and they're touched with history for families. Does it ever happen that those cemeteries end up being moved to a bigger cemetery, do you think?
I think in the past, lots of things happened. Certainly we know of examples where gravestones ended up in somebody's old farm basement because they may have taken over the field. So that's why we don't really know how many small cemeteries there might be out in about the county.
Some of them might just have a couple of graves.
Right. And so I really like the title, In Memoriam, because it's exactly what you were just talking about. It's a chance for us to remember those who came before us. And cemeteries and memorials and the landscapes of cemeteries help us to do that in a respectful, mindful way.
And it's interesting that how you just educated me about rubbings not being a good thing. And I guess the same with the movement of people would like to collect things, wildflowers and stuff from the woods, and now they've kind of come up with the slogan, take only pictures, leave only footprints. And that sort of applies to this kind of activity as well. You can take as many photographs as you want, and you can walk around there, you're encouraged to, but we want to preserve this for posterity and let people appreciate their connection to the past in a way that's actually really physical. You know, you can talk about the history of somebody, but here's a really physical place. Somebody really was here. We're really connected to that. And it's interesting, too, when you go to local cemeteries, how many names you recognize from people who are here today that still have that family name. How many Teeters are there, you know? How many people that you recognize from the names of street names, for instance, that are there, that were founding the place. So even if you're not a member of one of those families, it's kind of fun to look, because people with those family names are on signs, on street signs, on the names of your coworkers and colleagues and stuff all over the place. So
it's a connection back to place. You're right. Very much so.
Well, we're getting near the end of the show, so I'd like to give you, Rod, a chance to kind of promote your event. Maybe you'd like to kind of go through some of the activities that are coming up in conjunction with this exhibit and tell about when it runs. And if you like, you can talk to your very own camera there.
Okay, sure. So this goes through mid-February. And again, you're going to see some slides that will give you the specific dates, but a couple to just mention are next Saturday, October 17th, will be the one focused on the Arlington National Cemetery. The 15th, we have the archaeology of cemeteries. November 7th is the war memorials, veteran memorials in cemeteries. So they will continue into January. Some of the ones for January and February we don't have fully planned out yet, so please check back on our website, or if you get our newsletter, we'll be giving updates through that. Certainly go to one of the tours, or take the scavenger hunt. Participate in Historic Ithaca's sprint in the Ithaca City Cemetery on October 31st. Come and hear about this coffin man on Halloween, on October 31st. So there's several ways to be engaged, and we hope that you will keep posted on things coming up. And of course, we're doing things beyond this cemetery exhibit as well. So if you don't get our electronic newsletter, please call us and find out how to sign up to get our electronic newsletter.
And Donna, I'd like to give you a last word too. And as the person who curated this exhibit, what was the most fun thing for you about making this exhibit?
The discovery that cemeteries, I think, are misunderstood places. I think people have the misconception that they're kind of morbid or
Creepy
maybe
places where ghosts are going to jump up out of the ground and grab you.
Right, and it's associated with, late October evenings. And I would suggest that cemeteries are more for summer mornings. They are beautiful park-like places full of peace and serenity and great feelings of comfort and history, and I think people should recognize that. This is what this exhibit taught me.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For all of you guys, we're going to be running a whole list of all of the events in conjunction with this exhibit at the History Center right at the end of this program, so you can get your pens and pencils out. And you can also just go to the History Center's websites where all of that will be listed. We'll put the History Center website and contact information up there as well. And as I always do, Rod, how much does it cost to attend all these wonderful seminars and tours?
Nothing.
Free, free. Connect with your county. It is free with the History Center. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks to all of you. Good night.